Okay, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Okay, here we go. All right, on to, I believe this is chapter 4, or no, 5. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, um, so we're just right at, before we even start, we're at 29.5% through the book, so, you know, not quite a third. Should be by the time we're done with this chapter, though. All right, lots of pictures in this chapter, by the way. So let's go ahead. This one is called the Nephilim, People of the Fiery Rockets. Sumerian and Akkadian texts leave no doubt that the peoples of the ancient Near East were certain that the gods of heaven and earth were able to rise from earth and ascend into the heavens, as well as roam earth's skies at will. In a text dealing with the rape of Inanna Ishtar by an unidentified person, he justifies his deed thus, quote, "One day my queen, after crossing heaven, crossing earth, Inanna, after crossing heaven, crossing earth, after crossing Elam and Shubur, after crossing the Hierodule." I've never heard that word before. Hierodule. The Hierodule approached, weary, fell asleep. I saw her from the edge of my garden, kissed her, copulated with her. end quote. Inanna, here described as roaming the heavens over many lands that lie far apart, feats possible only by flying, herself spoke on another occasion of her flying. In a text which S. Langdon in Revue de Assyriologie et de Archéologie orientale named, quote, a classical liturgy to Inini, end quote, the goddess laments her expulsion from her city. Acting on the instructions of Enlil, an emissary who, quote, brought to me the word of heaven, end quote, entered her throne room, quote, his unwashed hands put on me, end quote, and after some indignities, quote, me from my temple they caused to fly, a queen am I, whom from my city like a bird they caused to fly, end quote. Such a capability by Inanna, as well as the other major gods, was often indicated by the ancient artists by depicting the gods anthropomorphic in all other respects, as we have seen, with wings. The wings, as can be seen from numerous depictions, were not part of the body, not natural wings, but rather a decorative attachment to the god's clothing. And we have our first picture, which is a vase, and I'm going to assume this is Inanna on it, Ishtar. So I'll show you that real quick. And there we have it. I'm assuming that there are pieces of it, like this piece here and this piece here, and they're assuming the outer edge because it's all missing. I don't know. Couldn't tell you on that. Inanna/Ishtar, whose far-flung travels are mentioned in many ancient texts, commuted between her initial distant domain in Aratta and her coveted abode in Uruk. She called upon Enki in Eridu and Enlil in Nippur, and visited her brother Utu at his headquarters in Sippar. But her most celebrated journey was to the lower world, the domain of her sister Ereshkigal. The journey was the subject not only of epic tales, but also of artistic depictions on cylinder seals, the latter showing the goddess with wings, to stress the fact that she flew over from Sumer to the lower world. And then we have another picture. Actually, we have two. Let me read this. I'll just read this. There's not a lot of text here, and then I'll show you both. The text dealing with the hazardous journey describes how Inanna very meticulously put on herself 7 objects prior to the start of the voyage, and how she had to give them up as she passed through the 7 gates leading to her sister's abode. 7 such objects are also mentioned in the other texts dealing with Inanna's skyborne travels. 1, the Shugara she put on her head. 2, measuring pendants on her ears. 3, chains of small blue stones around her neck. 4, twin stones on her shoulders, and he has stones in parentheses. 5, a golden cylinder in her hands. 6, straps clasping her breast. And 7, the pala garment clothed around her body. Though no one has as yet been able to explain the nature and significance of these 7 objects, we feel that the answer has long been available. Excavating the Assyrian capital Assur from 1903 to 1914, Walter Andre and his colleagues found in the Temple of Ishtar a battered statue of the goddess showing her with various contraptions attached to her chest and back. In 1934, archaeologists excavating at Mari came upon a similar but intact statue buried in the ground. It was a life-size likeness of a beautiful woman. Her unusual headdress was adorned with a pair of horns, indicating that she was a goddess. Standing around the 4,000-year-old statue, the archaeologists were thrilled by her lifelike appearance. In a snapshot, one can hardly distinguish between the statue and the living men. They named her the goddess with a vase because she was holding a cylindrical object. Okay, I'll go ahead and show you those two pictures. So we have this depiction with this, I assume this is a goddess flying with all the stuff attached to her. He's holding a bow backwards. I'm not sure what that's about. And yeah, don't know. He didn't explain what this is. But anyway, and then this is the, I assume, the statue or a similar one to what he was just talking, the goddess with the vase. So, all right, moving on. Oh, actually, I'll go ahead and show you this. It's a close-up of the face and the back of her head. So she's got horn here, and then something strapped onto the back of her head here. Okay. Unlike the flat carvings or bas reliefs, like this life-size three-dimensional representation of the goddess reveals interesting features about her attire. On her head, she wears not a milliner's chapeau, but a special helmet protruding from it on both sides and fitted over the ears are objects to remind one of a pilot's earphones. Okay. On her neck and upper chest, the goddess wears a necklace of many small and probably precious stones. In her hands, she holds a cylindrical object which appears too thick and heavy to be a vase for holding water. Over a blouse of see-through material, two parallel straps run across her chest, leading back to and holding in place an unusual box of rectangular shape. The box is held tight against the back of the goddess's neck and is firmly attached to the helmet with a horizontal strap. Okay, and according to Twitch, we are going into an ad break. So, let's see. I'll just stop when it gets here. Oh, there it goes. All right. So we'll just wait for the ad to end. I'll have a sip of my drink here. I know not everybody sees these. Anybody watching live might see them. I know I doubt it shows them on the video when you get to YouTube, but for anybody that's watching live, I don't want to be reading while there's an ad. And it should be ending here in just a second. Okay. So, whatever the box held inside must have been heavy, for the contraption is further supported by two large shoulder pads. The weight of the box is increased by a hose that is connected to its base by a circular clasp. The collected package of instruments for this is what they undoubtedly were. Is held in place with the aid of the two sets of straps that crisscross the goddess's back and chest. The parallel between the 7 objects required by Inanna for her aerial journeys and the dress and objects worn by the statue from Mari, and probably also the mutilated one found at Ishtar's temple in Ashur, is easily proved. We see the measuring pendants, the earphones on her ears, the rows of chains of small stones around her neck, the twin stones, the 2 shoulder pads on her shoulders, the golden cylinder in her hands, and the clasping straps that crisscross her breast. She is indeed clothed in a pala garment, ruler's garment, and on her head she wears the shugara helmet, a term that literally means that which makes go far into universe. All this suggests to us that the attire of Inanna was that of an aeronaut or an astronaut. The Old Testament called the angels of the Lord Malachim literally emissaries, who carried divine messages and carried out divine commands. As so many instances reveal, they were divine airmen. Jacob saw them going up a sky ladder. Hagar, I actually don't know how to pronounce that. Hagar. I would say Hagar. Abraham's concubine was addressed by them from the sky, and it was they who brought about the aerial destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The biblical account of the events preceding the destruction of the two sinful cities illustrates the fact that these emissaries were, on the one hand, anthropomorphic in all aspects, and on the other hand, they could be identified as angels as soon as they were observed. We learned that their appearance was sudden. Okay, I'm not sure. I guess he's. I'll just try to read it. Abraham, quote, raised his eyes, and lo and behold, there were three men standing by him, end quote. Bowing and calling them my lords, he pleaded with them, quote, do not pass over thy servant, end quote, and prevailed on them to wash their feet, rest, and eat. Having done as Abraham had requested, two of the angels, the third man turned out to be the Lord himself, then proceeded to Sodom. Lot, the nephew of Abraham, quote, was sitting at the gate of Sodom, and when he saw them, he rose up to meet them and bowed to the ground and said, if it pleases my lords, pray come to the house of thy servant and wash your feet and sleep overnight, end quote. Then he, quote, he made for them a feast, and they ate, end quote. When the news of the arrival of the two spread in the town, quote, all the townspeople, young and old, surrounded the house and called out to Lot and said, where are the men who came this night unto thee, end quote. How are these men who ate, drank, slept, and washed their tired feet, nevertheless so instantly recognizable as angels of the Lord? The only plausible explanation is that what they wore, their helmets or uniforms, or what they carried, their weapons, made them immediately recognizable. That they carried distinctive weapons is certainly a possibility. The two men at Sodom, about to be lynched by the crowd, quote, smote the people at the entrance of the house with blindness, and they were unable to find the doorway, end quote. And another angel, this time appearing to Gideon as he was chosen to be a judge in Israel, gave him a divine sign by touching a rock with his baton, whereupon a fire jumped out of the rock. The team, headed by Andre, found yet another unusual depiction of Ishtar at her temple in Ashur. More a wall sculpture than the usual relief, it showed the goddess with a tight-fitting decorated helmet with the earphones extended as though they had their own flat antennas, and wearing very distinct goggles that were part of the helmet. And he has a picture. So I will show you that. So, all right, I guess I can see that how he gets goggles out of that. Yeah, not much more to say there. Needless to say, any man seeing a person, male or female, so clad, would at once realize that he is encountering a divine aeronaut. Clay figurines found at Sumerian sites and believed to be some 5,500 years old may well be crude representations of such Malachim, holding wand-like weapons. In one instance, the face is seen through a helmet's visor. In the other instance, the emissary wears the distinct divine conical headdress and a uniform studded with circular objects of unknown function. Okay, and he's got a bunch of pictures here. I'll just go back. Well, No, I'll go ahead and read it. The eye slots or goggles of the figurines are a most interesting feature because the Near East in the 4th millennium BC was literally swamped with wafer-like figurines that depicted in a stylized manner the upper part of the deities, exaggerating their most prominent features, a conical helmet with elliptical visors or goggles. A horde of such figurines were found at Tel Brak, a prehistoric site on the Kabur River, the river on whose banks Ezekiel saw the divine chariot millennia later. It is undoubtedly no mere coincidence that the Hittites, linked to Sumer and Akkad via the Kabur area, adopted as their written sign for gods the symbol. Yeah, it's a symbol. I can't. uh, Clearly borrowed from the eye figurines. It is also no wonder that this symbol or hieroglyph for divine being expressed in artistic styles came to dominate the art not only of Asia Minor but also of the early Greeks during the Minoan and Mycenaean periods. And then he's got 3 more examples of it. It's basically like a C, an inverted C, and a line in between all crammed together. That's what it looks like. The ancient texts indicate that the gods put on such special attire not only for their flights in Earth's skies, but also when they ascended to the distant heavens. So let me show you all of these pictures now. So here's the first one he was talking about where the face is seen through the visor of a helmet. This is the one with the uniform with all the buttons or whatever on it. The conical helmets with the goggles. And then here's the symbol he was talking about, and then the stylized versions of it down here. Okay. Speaking of her occasional visits to Anu at his celestial abode, Inanna herself explained that she could undertake such journeys because, quote, Enlil himself fastened the divine me, attire about my body. Meh. I don't know what that's supposed to be. End quote. Sorry. The text quoted Enlil as saying to her, quote, you have lifted the me. You have tied the me to your hands. I don't know. Is that supposed to be meh? I don't know. You have gathered the me. You have attached the me to your breast. O queen of all the me, O radiant light, who with her hand grasps the 7 me. I don't know. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that right. An earlier Sumerian ruler invited by the gods to ascend to the heavens was named Enmedur-Anki, which literally meant ruler whose meh, connected heaven and earth. An inscription by Nebuchadnezzar II describing the reconstruction of a special pavilion for Marduk's celestial chariot states that it was part of the, quote, fortified house of the 7 of heaven and earth. The scholars refer to the me as divine power objects. I hope he gets away from that. I know I'm butchering how it's supposed to be pronounced. Literally, the term stems from the concept of, quote, swimming in celestial waters, end quote. Inanna described them as parts of the celestial garment, but she put on for her journeys in the boat of heaven. The me were thus parts of the special gear worn for flying in Earth's skies as well as into outer space. The Greek legend of Icarus had him attempt to fly attaching feathered wings to his body with wax. The evidence from the ancient Near East shows that though the gods may have been depicted with wings to indicate their flying capabilities, or perhaps sometimes put on winged uniforms as a mark of their airmanship, they never attempted to use what attached wings for flying. Instead, they used vehicles for such travels. The Old Testament informs us that the patriarch Jacob, spending the night in a field outside of Haran, saw a ladder down. What? He's got a single quote mark, but no ending quote mark. So I'm not sure where the second one's supposed to be. The Lord himself stood at the top of the ladder, and the astounded Jacob, quote, was fearful, and he said, "Indeed, a God is present in this place, and I knew it not. How awesome is this place! Indeed, this is none but the Lord's abode, and this is the gateway to heaven." End quote. There are two interesting points in this tale. The first is that the divine beings going up and down at this gateway to heaven, quote unquote, were using a mechanical facility, a ladder. The second is that the sight took Jacob by complete surprise. The quote unquote Lord's abode, the ladder, and the angels of the Lord using it were not there when Jacob lay down to sleep in the field. Suddenly there was the awesome vision, and by morning the abode, the ladder, and their occupants were gone. We may conclude that the equipment used by the divine beings was some kind of craft that could appear over a place, hover for a while, and disappear from sight once again. The Old Testament also reports that the prophet Elijah did not die on earth, but, quote, went up into heaven by a whirlwind, end quote. He rode a helicopter. No, I'm kidding. This was not a sudden and unexpected event. The ascent of Elijah to the heavens was prearranged. He was told to go to Bethel, the Lord's house, on a specific day. Rumors had already spread among his disciples that he was about to be taken to the heavens. When they queried his deputy whether the rumor was true, he confirmed that indeed, quote, the Lord will take away the master today, end quote. And then there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and Elijah went up into heaven by a whirlwind. Even more celebrated, and certainly better described, was the heavenly chariot seen by the prophet Ezekiel, who dwelt among the Judean deportees on the banks of the Kebur River in northern Mesopotamia. Quote, the heavens were opened, and I saw the appearances of the Lord, end quote. What Ezekiel saw was a man-like being surrounded by brilliance and brightness, sitting on a throne that rested on a metal firmament within the chariot. The vehicle itself, which could move whichever way upon wheels within wheels and rise off the ground vertically, was described by the prophet as a glowing whirlwind. Quote, and I saw a whirlwind coming from the north as a great cloud with flashes of fire and brilliance all around it, and within it, from within the fire, there was a radiance like a glowing halo, end quote. Some recent students of the biblical description, such as Joseph B. Blumrich of the U.S. National Aeronautics and Space Administration, has concluded that the chariot seen by Ezekiel was a helicopter, consisting of a cabin resting on 4 posts, each equipped with rotary wings, a whirlwind indeed. About 2 millennia earlier, when the Sumerian ruler Gudea commemorated his building the temple for his god Ninurta, he wrote that there appeared to him, quote, a man that shone like heaven, by the helmet on his head he was a god, end quote. When Ninurta and 2 other divine companions appeared to Gudea, they were standing beside Ninurta's divine black wind bird, quote unquote. As it turned out, the main purpose of the temple's construction was to provide a secure zone, an inner special enclosure within the temple grounds for this divine bird. The construction of this enclosure, Gudea reported, required huge beams and massive stones imported from afar. Only when the divine bird was placed within the enclosure was the construction of the temple deemed completed. And once in place, the divine bird could lay hold on heaven, quote unquote, and was capable of, quote, bringing together heaven and earth, end quote. The object was so important, sacred, that it was constantly protected by two divine weapons, the Supreme Hunter and the Supreme Killer, weapons that emitted beams of light and death-dealing rays. The similarity of the biblical and Sumerian descriptions, both of the vehicles and the beings within them, is obvious. The description of the vehicles as bird, windbird, and whirlwind that could rise heavenward while emitting a brilliance leaves no doubt that they were some kind of flying machine. Enigmatic murals uncovered at Tel Gasul, a site east of the Dead Sea whose ancient name is unknown, may shed light on our subject. Dating to circa 3500 BC, the murals depict a large 8-pointed compass, the head of a helmeted person with a bell-shaped chamber, and two designs of mechanical crafts that could well have been the whirlwinds of antiquity. The ancient text also describes some vehicles used to lift aeronauts into the skies. Before I get to that, there is a picture. I'll let you decide what the picture is of. And there you have it. Is that a vehicle? Is that a person? Is it a person with fuzzy hair, a headband, goggles, and a gas mask? Who knows? I don't know what it's supposed to be. Okay, Gudea stated that as the divine bird rose to circle the lands, it, quote, flashed upon the raised bricks, end quote. The protected enclosure was described as Muna da Tuitur, strange stone resting place of the Mu. Urukagina, who ruled in Lagash, said in regard to the divine black windbird, quote, the Mu that lights up as a fire I made high and strong, end quote. Similarly, Lu Utu, who ruled in Umma in the 3rd millennium BC, constructed a place for a Mu, quote, which in a fire comes forth, for the god Utu in the appointed place within his temple, end quote. The Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II, recording his rebuilding of Marduk's sacred precinct, said that within fortified walls made of burned brick and gleaming onyx marble, quote, I raised the head of the boat Idgeul, the chariot of Marduk's princeliness, the boat Zagmuku, whose approach is observed, the supreme traveler between heaven and earth, in the midst of the pavilion I enclosed, screening off its sides, end quote. Idgeul, the first epithet employed to describe this supreme traveler, or chariot of Marduk, literally means high to heaven, bright at night. Zagmuku, the second epithet describing the vehicle, clearly a boat nesting in a special pavilion, means the bright Mu which is for afar. That a Mu, an oval-topped conical object, was indeed installed in the inner sacred enclosure of the temples of the great gods of heaven and earth can, fortunately, be proved. An ancient coin found at Byblos, the biblical Gebel, on the Mediterranean coast of present-day Lebanon depicts the great temple of Ishtar, though shown as it stood in the 1st millennium BC. The requirement that temples be built and rebuilt upon the same site and in accordance with the original plan undoubtedly means that we see the basic elements of the original temple of Byblos traced to millennia earlier. Oh, okay, I see where he's going with the coin. The coin depicts a two-part temple. In front stands the main temple structure, imposing with its columned imposing with its columned gate. Behind it is an inner courtyard or sacred area, hidden and protected by a high, massive wall. It is clearly a raised area, for it can be reached only by ascending many stairs. In the center of this sacred area stands a special platform, its crossbeam construction resembling that of the Eiffel Tower, as though built to withstand great weight, and on the platform stands the object of all this security and protection, an object that can only be a mu. Like most Sumerian syllabic words, mu had a primary meaning in the case of mu. It was, quote, that which rises straight, end quote. Its 30-odd nuances encompassed the meanings heights, fire, command, accounted period, as well as, in later times, that which by one is remembered. If we trace the written sign for mu from its Assyrian and Babylonian cuneiform stylizations to its original Sumerian pictographs, the following pictorial evidence emerges. And he's got a whole line of those. So there's a picture of the coin and those symbols. Here, I'll go ahead and show you. So first, the coin. So here's the temple he was talking about, the courtyard, the crisscross structure, and the mu here. And then down here is the cuneiform stylization to original Sumerian pictographs. So I don't know which direction this is supposed to be going. This looks like cuneiform to me more than any of this. So we clearly, switch back to that. We clearly see a conical chamber depicted by itself or with a narrow section attached to it. Quote, from a golden chamber in the sky I will watch over thee, end quote. Inanna promised to the Assyrian king. Was the mu the heavenly chamber? A hymn to Inanna Ishtar and her journeys to the boat of heaven, in the boat of heaven, clearly indicates that the mu was the vehicle in which the gods roamed the skies far and high. Quote, Lady of heaven, she puts on the garment of heaven, she valiantly ascends towards heaven, over all the peopled lands, she flies in her mu, lady who in her mu, to the heights of heaven joyfully wings, over all the resting places, she flies in her mu. End quote. There is evidence to show that the people of the eastern Mediterranean had seen such a rocket-like object not only in a temple enclosure, but actually in flight. Hittite glyphs, for example, showed against a background of starry heavens, cruising missiles, rockets mounted on launch pads, and a god inside I guess inside it, maybe it's a typo, radiating chamber. Maybe it's inside a radiating chamber. I'm not sure. It's actually written as the letter U all by itself. Professor H. Frankfurt cylinder seals, in quotations, I don't know, or in parentheses, demonstrating how both the art of making the Mesopotamian cylinder seals and the subjects depicted on them spread throughout the ancient world, reproduces the design on a seal found in Crete and dated to the 13th century BC. The seal design clearly depicts a rocket ship moving in the skies and propelled by flames escaping from its rear. Okay. I'll show you that in just a second. The winged horses, the entwined animals, the winged celestial globe, and the deity with horns protruding from his headdress are all known Mesopotamian themes. It can certainly be assumed that the fiery rocket shown on the Cretan seal was also an object familiar throughout the ancient Near East. Indeed, a rocket with wings or fins, reachable by a ladder, can be seen on a tablet excavated at Gezer, Gezer, a town in ancient Canaan, west of Jerusalem. The double imprint of the same seal also shows a rocket resting on the ground next to a palm tree. The celestial nature of destination of the objects is attested by symbols of the sun, moon, and zodiacal constellations that adorn the seal. All right, so we have almost a moose-looking thing, and a couple of the cone-shaped objects on this one's on a stand. So maybe that's what he's talking about as far as rockets on launch pads. Something with wings. Not sure about this one. He did mention something about looking out from. Oh, there, the god inside a radiating chamber. So that must be what that is, or what he says it is. And then here we have the seal with, there's the rocket. I'm sure that's what he's referring to, is the rocket with the fire escaping from it. So yeah. Anyway, I would like to see that flipped over so I could see this better. I mean, I can see it, but you know what I mean. Anyway, let's move on. We've got a lot more to go. We've got 2 more pictures on these pages. The Mesopotamian texts that refer to the inner enclosures of temples, or to the heavenly journeys of the gods, or even to instances where mortals ascended to the heavens, employ the Sumerian term mu, or its Semitic derivations shumu, which is a mu, sham or shem. Because the term also connoted, quote, that by which one is remembered, end quote, the word has come to be taken as meaning name. But the universal application of name to early texts that spoke of an object used in flying has obscured the true meaning of the ancient records. Thus, G.A. Barton, The Royal Inscriptions of Sumer and Akkad, established the unchallenged translation of Gudia's temple inscription that its mu shall hug the lands from horizon to horizon, as its name shall fill the lands. A hymn to Ishkur, extolling his ray-emitting mu that could attain the heights of heaven, was likewise rendered, Thy name is radiant, it reaches heaven's zenith. Sensing, however, that mu or shem may mean an object and not name, some scholars have treated the term as a suffix or grammatical phenomenon not requiring translation, and have thereby avoided the issue altogether. It is not too difficult to trace the etymology of the term and the route by which the sky chamber assumed the meaning of name. Sculptures have been found that show a god inside a rocket-shaped chamber, as in this object of extreme antiquity, now in the possession of the University Museum, Philadelphia, where the celestial nature of the chamber is attested by the 12 globes decorating it. I'll go ahead and show you that before I finish reading this page. Whoops, I'm sorry. I hit the wrong one. So he mentioned something about a rocket resting on the ground, and I thought this was the illustration he was talking about. I see what could be described as a rocket on a pedestal there and there. I don't know. And another one there. And then this is supposedly the god in the rocket chamber with the 12 globes. Make of that what you will. Many seals similarly depict a god, and sometimes two, within such oval divine chambers. In most instances, these gods within their sacred ovals were depicted as objects of veneration. Worship, wow, wishing to worship their gods throughout the lands, and not only at the official house of each deity, the ancient peoples developed the customs of setting up imitations of the god within his divine sky chamber. Stone pillars shaped to simulate the oval vehicle were erected at selected sites, and the image of the god was carved into the stone to indicate that he was within the object. It was only a matter of time before kings and rulers associating these pillars, called stelae, with the ability to ascend to the heavenly abode, began to carve their own images upon the stelae as a way of associating themselves with the eternal abode. If they could not escape a physical oblivion, it was important that at least their name be forever commemorated. That the purpose of the commemorative stone pillars was to stimulate a fiery skyship can further be gleaned from the term by which such stone stelae were known in antiquity. And we have a bulleted list here. The Sumerians called them Naru, stones that rise. The Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians called them Naru, objects that give off light. The Amurru called them Nuras, fiery objects. In Hebrew, Ner still means a pillar that emits light, and thus today's candle. In the Indo-European tongues of the Hurrians and the Hittites, the stelae were called Hu'uashi, fire bird of stone. And that's the end of the bulleted list. Biblical references indicate familiarity with two types of commemorative monument, a yad and a shem. The prophet Isaiah conveyed to the suffering people of Judea the Lord's promise of a better and safer future. Quote, "And I will give them in my house and within my walls a yad and a shem." End quote. Literally translated, this would amount to the Lord's promise to provide his people with a hand and a name. Fortunately, however, from ancient monuments called yads that still stand in the Holy Land, we learn that they were distinguished by tops shaped like pyramidions. The shem, on the other hand, was a memorial with an oval top. Both, it seems evident, began as simulations of the sky chamber, the god's vehicle for ascending to the eternal abode. In ancient Egypt, in fact, the devout made pilgrimage to a special temple at Heliopolis, to view and worship the benben, a pyramidion-shaped object in which the gods had arrived on earth in times immemorial. Egyptian pharaohs, on their deaths, were subjected to a ceremony of opening of the mouth, in which they were supposed to be transported by a similar yad or a shem to the divine abode of eternal life. Okay, and then we have an illustration here of one of those stelae, I assume, meant to show a god within. So I'll show you that. And there we have it. Very definitely a stele. Lots of stelae all over the world. Basically means any kind of object that's standing, a single carved standing stone. All right, moving on. The persistence of biblical translators to employ name wherever they encounter Shem has ignored a quote, far-sighted study published more than a century ago by... Oh, wait, that's not a quote. Okay, I don't know. It's not a quote mark. It looks like one. It's just a mark on the page. Far-sighted study published more than a century ago by G.M. Redslub in Zeitschrift der Deutschen Morgenländischen Gesellschaft, in which he correctly pointed out that the term Shem and the term Samaim, heaven, stem from the root word Shema, meaning that which is highward. When the Old Testament reports that King David made a Shem to mark his victory over the Arameans, Redslub said he did not, quote, make a name, end quote, but set up a monument pointing skyward. The realization that Mer-Shem in many Mesopotamian texts should be read not as name but as sky vehicle opens the way to the understanding of the true meaning of many ancient tales, including the biblical story of the Tower of Babel. The book of Genesis, in its 11th chapter, reports on the attempt by humans to raise up a Shem. The biblical account is given in concise and precise language that bespeaks historical fact. Yet, generations of scholars and translators have sought to impart to the tale only an allegorical meaning because, as they understood it, it was a tale concerning mankind's desire to make a name for itself. Such an approach voided the tale of its factual meaning. Our conclusion regarding the true meaning of Shem makes the tale as meaningful as it must have been to the people of antiquity themselves. The biblical tale of the Tower of Babel deals with events that followed the repopulation of Earth after the deluge, when some of the people, quote, journeyed from the east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they settled there, end quote. The land of Shinar is, of course, the land of Sumer, in the plain between the two rivers in southern Mesopotamia. And the people already knowledgeable concerning the art of brickmaking and high-rise construction for an urban civilization said, quote, let us build us a city and a tower whose top shall reach the heavens, and let us make us a Shem, lest we be scattered upon the face of the earth, end quote. And this human scheme was not to God's liking. Quote, and the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of Adam had erected, and he said, behold, all are as one people with one language, and this is just the beginning of their undertakings. Now anything which they shall scheme to do shall no longer be impossible for them. And the Lord said to some, that was the end of the quote, and then he has a comment. And the Lord said to some colleagues whom the Old Testament does not name, quote, come, let us go down and there confound their language, so that they may not understand each other's speech. And the Lord scattered them from there upon the face of the whole earth, and they ceased to build the city. Therefore was its name called Babel, for there did the Lord mingle the earth's tongue. End quote. The traditional translation of Shem as name has kept the tale unintelligible for generations. And there's a picture before I go on, where he was talking about the a king being prepared for after death, I guess. Oh, I keep doing that. I'm sorry. Keep hitting the wrong screen. Okay, so here's what I was talking about. So it looks like they're preparing a body for burial, I would assume. So anyway, that was all. Let's move on. Why did the ancient residents of Babylonia, exert themselves to make a name? Why was the name to be placed upon a tower, quote, a tower whose top shall reach the heavens, end quote? And how could the making of a name counteract the effects of mankind's scattering upon earth? If all that those people wanted was to make, as scholars explain, a reputation for themselves, why did this attempt upset the Lord so much? Why was the raising of a name deemed by the deity to be a feat after which, quote, anything which they shall scheme to do shall no longer be impossible for them, end quote? The traditional explanations certainly are insufficient to clarify why the Lord found it necessary to call upon other unnamed deities to go down and put an end to this human attempt. We believe that the answers to all these questions become plausible, even obvious, once we read skyborne vehicle rather than name for the word Shem, which is the term employed in the original Hebrew text of the Bible. The story would then deal with the concern of mankind that as the people spread upon earth, they would lose contact with one another. So they decided to build a skyborne vehicle and to erect a launch tower for such a vehicle so that they too could, like the goddess Ishtar, for example, fly in a moo, quote, over all the peopled lands, end quote. A portion of the Babylonian text known as the Epic of Creation relates that the first quote-unquote gateway of the gods was constructed in Babylon by the gods themselves. The Anunnaki, the rank-and-file gods, were ordered to construct the gateway of the gods. Quote, let its brickwork be fashioned, its shem shall be in the designated place, end quote. For 2 years the Anunnaki toiled, quote, applied the implement, molded bricks, end quote, until they, quote, they raised high the top of Eshagila, end quote, house of great gods, and another quote, built the stage tower as high heaven, end quote. It was thus some cheek on the part of mankind to establish its own launch tower on a site originally used for the purpose by the gods. For the name of the place, Babili, literally means gateway of the gods. Is there any other evidence to corroborate the biblical tale and our interpretation of it? The Babylonian historian priest Berosus, who in the 3rd century BC compiled a history of mankind, reported that the, quote, first inhabitants of the land, glorying in their own strength, undertook to raise a tower whose top should reach the sky, end quote. But the tower was overturned by the gods and heavy winds. Quote, and the gods introduced a diversity of tongues among them, who till that time had all spoken the same language, end quote. George Smith, in the Chaldean accounts of Genesis, found in the writings of the Greek historian Hestius a report that, in accordance with olden traditions, the people who had escaped the deluge came to Sennaar in Babylonia, but were driven away from there by a diversity of tongues. The historian Alexander Polyhistor, 1st century BC, wrote that all men formerly spoke the same language. Then some undertook to erect a large and lofty tower so that they might, quote, climb up to heaven, end quote. But the chief god confounded their design by sending a whirlwind, which each tribe was given a different language. Quote, the city where it happened was Babylon, end quote. There is little doubt by now that the biblical tales, as well as the reports of the Greek historians of 2,000 years ago and their predecessor Berosus, all stem from earlier Sumerian origins. A.H. Sayce, in The Religion of the Babylonians, reported reading on a fragmentary tablet in the British Museum, quote, the Babylonian version of the building of the Tower of Babel, end quote. In all instances, the attempt to reach the heavens and the ensuing confusion of tongues are basic elements of the version. There are other Sumerian texts that record the deliberate confusion of man's tongue by an irate god. Mankind presumably did not possess at that time the technology required for such an aerospace project. The guidance and collaboration of a knowledgeable god was essential. Did such a god defy the others to help mankind? A Sumerian seal depicts a confrontation between armed gods, apparently over the disputed construction by men of a stage tower. Okay, and then we've got two pictures. A Sumerian stele now on view in Paris in the Louvre may well depict the incident reported in the book of Genesis. Okay, I'll come to that in a minute. I'll go ahead and read this. It was put up circa 2300 BC by Naram Sin, king of Akkad. The scholars have assumed that it depicts the king victorious over his enemies, but the large central figure is that of a deity and not of the human king, for the person is wearing a helmet adorned with horns, the identifying mark exclusive to the gods. Furthermore, this central figure does not appear to be the leader of the smaller-sized humans, but to be trampling upon them. These humans, in turn, do not seem to be engaged in any warlike activities, but to be marching toward the standing in adoration of the same large conical object on which the deity's attention is also focused. Okay. Armed with a bow and lance, the deity seems to have the object menacingly, to view the object menacingly rather than with adoration. The conical object is shown reaching toward three celestial bodies. If its size, shape, and purpose indicate that it was a Shem, then the scene depicted an angry and fully armed god trampling upon people celebrating the raising of a Shem. Quote, both... Oh, no, it's not a quote. Both the Mesopotamia text and the biblical account impart the same moral. The flying machines were meant for the gods and not for mankind. Okay, so here are the two pictures. So I thought he was referring to this one because there is somebody trotting on somebody, but he was actually talking about this one. So here are all the people. Here's the god. He's standing on their heads. He has the bow and the spear and the horns, and there is the conical object pointing at three heavenly objects, celestial bodies. So there you go. Wow. Okay, we got a ways to go. All right. I might have to take a break in this one. This is like a 50-page chapter, so. Men, assert both Mesopotamian and biblical texts, could ascend to the heavenly abode only upon the express wish of the gods, and therein lie more tales of ascents to the heavens and even of space flights. The Old Testament records the ascent to the heavens of several mortal beings. The first was Enoch, a pre-diluvial patriarch whom God befriended and who walked with the Lord. He was the seventh patriarch in the line of Adam and the great-grandfather of Noah, hero of the deluge. The fifth chapter of the book of Genesis lists the genealogies of all these patriarchs and the ages at which they died, except for Enoch, quote, who was gone for the Lord had taken him, end quote. By implication, tradition, it was heavenward to escape mortality on earth that God took Enoch. The other mortal was the prophet Elijah, who was lifted off earth and taken heavenward in a whirlwind. A little-known reference to the third mortal who visited the divine abode and was endowed there with great wisdom is provided in the Old Testament, and it concerns the ruler of Tyre, a Phoenician center on the eastern Mediterranean coast. We read in chapter 28 of the book of Ezekiel that the Lord commanded the prophet to remind the king how perfect and wise he was enabled by the deity to visit with the gods. Okay, rough sentence. Quote, Thou art molded by a plan full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy thicket. Thou art an anointed cherub protected, and I have placed thee in the sacred mountain as a god wouldst thou, moving within the fiery stones. End quote. Predicting that the ruler of Tyr should die a death, quote, of the uncircumcised, end quote, by the hand of strangers, even if he called out to them, quote, I am a deity, end quote, the Lord then told Ezekiel the reason. After the king was taken to the divine abode and given access to all wisdom and riches, his heart grew haughty. He misused his wisdom, and he defiled the temples. Quote, because thine heart is haughty, saying, a god am I, in the abode of the deity I sat, in the midst of the waters. Though thou art a man, not a god, thou set thy heart as that of a deity. End quote. The Sumerian texts also speak of several men who were privileged to ascend to the heavens. One was Adapa, the model man, created by Ea. To him, Ea, quote, had given wisdom, eternal life, he had not given him. Oh, okay. Sorry, let me reread that. Ea had given wisdom, eternal life he had not given him. End quote. As the years went by, Ea decided to avert Adapa's mortal end by providing him with a shem with which he was to reach the heavenly abode of Anu, there to partake of the bread of life and the water of life. When Adapa arrived at Anu's celestial abode, Anu demanded to know who had provided Adapa with a shem with which to reach the heavenly location. There are several important clues to be found in both the biblical and the Mesopotamian tales. Another typo, sorry. Tales of the rarest sense of mortals to the abode of the gods. Adapa, too, like the king of Tyr, was made of a perfect mold. All had to reach and employ a shem, fiery stone, to reach the celestial Eden. Some had gone up and returned to earth. Others, like the Mesopotamian hero of the deluge, stayed there to enjoy the company of the gods. It was to find this Mesopotamian Noah and obtain from him the secret of the tree of life that the Sumerian Gilgamesh set out. The futile search for mortal man by mortal man for the tree of life is the subject of one of the longest, most powerful epic texts bequeathed to human culture by the Sumerian civilization. Named by modern scholars the Epic of Gilgamesh, the moving tale concerns the ruler of Uruk, who was born to a mortal father and a divine mother. As a result, Gilgamesh was considered to be 2/3 of him god, 1/3 of him human, quote unquote, a circumstance that prompted him to seek escape from the death that was the fate of mortals. Tradition had informed him that one of his forefathers, Utnapishtim, the hero of the deluge, had escaped death, having been taken to the heavenly abode together with his spouse. Gilgamesh, therefore, decided to reach that place and obtain from his ancestor the secret of eternal life. What prompted him to go was what he took to be an invitation from Anu. The verses read like a description of the sighting of the falling back to earth of a spent rocket. Gilgamesh described it thus to his mother, the goddess Nin-sun. Quote, my mother, during the night I felt joyful, and I walked about among my nobles. The stars assembled in the heavens. The handiwork of Anu descended toward me. I sought to lift it. It was too heavy. I sought to move it. Move it I could not. The people of Uruk gathered about it, while the nobles kissed its legs. As I set my forehead, they gave me support. I raised it. I brought it to thee. End quote. The interpretation of the incident by Gilgamesh's mother is mutilated in the text and is thus unclear. But obviously Gilgamesh was encouraged by the sighting of the falling object, the handiwork of Anu, to embark on his adventure. In the introduction to the epic, the ancient reporter called Gilgamesh, quote, the wise one, he who has experienced everything, end quote. And then we have a poem Quote, secret things he has seen, what is hidden to man he knows. He even brought tidings of a time before the deluge. Oh, sorry, it's just a couple lines and a couple lines. He also took the distant journey, wearisome and under difficulties. He returned and engraved all his toil upon a stone pillar. The distant journey Gilgamesh undertook was, of course, his journey to the abode of the gods. He was accompanied by his comrade Enkidu. Their target was the land of Tilmun, for there Gilgamesh could raise a Shem for himself. The current translations employ the expected name, where the Sumerian Mu or the Akkadian Shumu appear in the ancient texts. We shall, however, employ Shem instead, so that the term's true meaning, a skyborne vehicle, will come through. Quote, the ruler, Gilgamesh, toward the land of Tilmun set his mind. He says to his companion Enkidu, O Enkidu, I would enter the land, set up my Shem, in the places where the Shems were raised up. I would raise my Shem. End quote. Unable to dissuade him, both the elders of Uruk and the gods whom Gilgamesh consulted advised him to first obtain the consent and assistance of Utu/Shamash. Quote, if thou wouldst enter the land, inform Utu, they cautioned him. The land, it is in Utu's charge, they stressed and re-stressed to him. End quote. Thus, forewarned and advised, Gilgamesh appealed to Utu for permission. Quote, let me enter the land, let me set up my Shem, in the places where the Shems are raised up. Let me raise my Shem, bring me to the landing place establish over me thy protection. I'm not sure what that means. An unfortunate break in the tablet leaves us ignorant regarding the location of the landing place. Oh, okay. That's why he just has it trail off. But whatever it was, Gilgamesh and his companion finally reached its outskirts. It was a restricted zone, protected by awesome guards. Weary and sleepy, the two friends decided to rest overnight before continuing. No sooner had sleep overcome them than something shook them up and awoke them. Quote, didst thou arouse me? Gilgamesh asked his comrade. Am I awake? He wondered, for he was witnessing unusual sights so awesome that he wondered whether he was awake or dreaming. End quote. He told Enkidu, quote, in my dream, my friend, the high ground toppled. It laid me low, trapped my feet. The glare was overpowering. A man appeared. The fairest in the land was he. His grace, from under the toppled ground, he pulled me out. He gave me water to drink. My heart quieted. And it looks like we're going into another ad. So I will sit here and wait for the ad to end. 34 seconds. Oh, long chapter. We've got, let's see. 18 pages to go. So, all right, we are back. So, 18 pages to go. So now, here is the. I read this quote. I'm gonna reread it because I might have been still finishing it up when the ad started. Quote, in my dream, my friend, the high ground toppled. It laid me low, trapped my feet. The glare was overpowering. A man appeared. The fairest in the land was he. His grace, from under the toppled ground, he pulled me out. He gave me water to drink. My heart quieted. End quote. Who was this man, the fairest in the land, who pulled Gilgamesh from under the landslide, gave him water, quieted his heart? And what was the overpowering glare that accompanied the unexplained landslide. Quote, unsure, troubled, Gilgamesh fell asleep again, but not for long. In the middle of the watch his sleep was ended. He started up, saying to his friend, "My friend, didst thou call me? Why am I awake? Didst thou not touch me? Why am I startled? Did not some god go by? Why is my flesh numb?" End quote. Thus mysteriously reawakened, Gilgamesh wondered who had touched him. If it was not his comrade, was it some god who went by? Once more, Gilgamesh dozed off, only to be awakened a third time. He described the awesome occurrence to his friend. Quote, "The vision that I saw was wholly awesome. The heavens shrieked, the earth boomed. Daylight failed, darkness came. Lightning flashed, a flame shot out. The clouds swelled, it rained death. Then the glow vanished, the fire went out, and all that had fallen had turned to ashes." End quote. One needs little imagination to see in these few verses an ancient account of the witnessing of the launching of a rocket ship. First, the tremendous thud as the rocket engines ignite, the heavens shrieked, accompanied by a marked shaking of the ground, the earth boomed. Clouds of smoke and dust enveloped the launching site. Daylight failed, darkness came. Then the brilliance of the ignited engines showed through, lightning flashed. As the rocket ship began to climb skyward, a flame shot up. The cloud of dust and debris swelled in all directions. Then, as it began to fall down, it rained death. Now the rocket ship was high in the sky, streaking heavenward. The glow vanished, the fire went out. The rocket ship was gone from sight, and the debris that had fallen had turned to ashes. Awed by what he saw, yet as determined as ever to reach his destination, Gilgamesh once more appealed to Shamash for protection and support. Overcoming a monstrous guard, he reached the mountain of Mashu, where one could see Shamash rise up to the vault of heaven. He was now near his first objective, the quote, place where the Shems are raised up, end quote. But the entrance to the site, apparently cut into the mountain, was guarded by fierce guards. Quote, "Their terror is awesome. Their glance is death. Their shimmering spotlight sweeps the mountains. They watch over Shamash as he ascends and descends." End quote. And okay. There is another cylinder seal impression here, and he's got a little explanation. A seal depiction showing Gilgamesh, second from left, and his companion Enkidu, far right, may well depict the intercession of a god with one of the robot-like guards who could sweep the area with spotlights and emit death rays. The description brings to mind the statement in the book of Genesis that God placed the revolving sword at the entrance to the Garden of Eden to block its access to humans. So let me show you that real quick. So Gilgamesh second from the left, and Enkidu far right, and that does look like a robot the way it's depicted. I mean, kind of. I can see robot in that depiction. All right. God damn it! I keep hitting the wrong thing. I'm sorry. When Gilgamesh explained his partly divine origins, the purpose of his trip, quote, about death and life, I wish to ask Utnapishtim, end quote, and the fact that he was on his way with the consent of Utu Shamash, the guards allowed him to go ahead. Proceeding, quote, along the route of Shamash, end quote, Gilgamesh found himself in utter darkness, quote, seeing nothing ahead or behind, end quote. He cried out in fright, traveling for many Beru, a unit of time, distance, or the arc of the heavens. He was still engulfed by darkness. Finally, quote, it had grown bright when 12 Beru he attained, end quote. The damaged and blurred text then has Gilgamesh arriving at a magnificent garden where the fruits and trees were carved of semi-precious stones. It was there that Utnapishtim resided. Posing his problem to his ancestor, Gilgamesh encountered a disappointing answer. Man, Utnapishtim said, cannot escape his mortal fate. However, he offered Gilgamesh a way to postpone death, revealing to him the location of the plant of youth. Quote, man becomes young in old age, end quote. It was called. Triumphant, Gilgamesh obtained the plant, but as fate would have it, he foolishly lost it on his way back and returned to Uruk empty-handed. Putting aside the literary and philosophic values of the epic tale, the story of Gilgamesh interests us here primarily for its aerospace aspects. The Shem that Gilgamesh required in order to reach the abode of the gods was undoubtedly a rocket ship, the launching of one of which he had witnessed as he neared the landing place. The rockets, it would seem, were located inside a mountain, and the area was a well-guarded, restricted zone. No pictorial depiction of what Gilgamesh saw has so far come to light, but a drawing found in the tomb of an Egyptian governor of a far land shows a rocket head above ground in a place where date trees grow. The shaft of the rocket is clearly stored underground in a man-made silo constructed of tubular segments and decorated with leopard skins. Okay. I guess that's the illustration of it. Very much in the manner of modern draftsmen, the ancient artist showed a cross-section of the underground silo. All right, so here is that picture. I guess this is supposed to be the underground silo. Okay. We can see the rocket containing a number of compartments. The lower ones show two men surrounded by curving tubes. Above them, there are three circular panels. Comparing the size of the rocket head, the Ben, to the size of the two men inside the rocket and the people above the ground, it is evident that the rocket head, equivalent to the Sumerian Mu, the celestial chamber, could easily hold one or two operators or passengers. So I'll show you that again so you can see. So comparing these guys and these guys to this chamber, or this rocket head. Okay. Til-Mun was the name of the land to which Gilgamesh set his course. The name literally meant land of the missiles. It was the land where the Shems were raised, a land under the authority of Utu Shamash, a place where one could see this god, quote, rise up to the vault of heavens. Another typo. And though the celestial counterpart of this member of the pantheon of 12 was the sun, S-U-N, we suggest that his name did not mean sun, S-U-N, but was an epithet describing his functions and responsibilities. His Sumerian name, Utu, meant he who brilliantly goes in. His derivate Akkadian name, Shem-Esh, was more explicit. Esh means fire, and we now know what Shem originally meant. Okay, I am going to go get some water. I will only be gone for just less than a minute, but I am going to put my be right back screen up. I'll be right back. Oh, hey, Vesper, I'll be right back. I'm doing great. I hope you're doing good. See you in just a second. Okay, I'm back. Told you it'd only be less than a minute. All right, I just wanted to fill my water glass. Um, where are we at? Okay. Utu Shamash was, quote, he of the fiery rocket ships, end quote. He was, we suggest, the commander of the spaceport of the gods. The commanding role of Utu Shamash in matters of travel to the heavenly abode of the gods and the functions performed by his subordinates in this connection are brought out in even greater detail in yet another Sumerian tale of a heavenward journey by a mortal. The Sumerian king lists inform us that the 13th ruler of Kish was Etana, quote, the one who to heaven ascended. Okay, before I go on, um, welcome in, Vesper. I don't know how long you've been here. Uh, oh, listening only. That's interesting. I've never seen that. Um, one of these days I'll figure out how to do a shout out. I've tried it before and I keep doing it wrong. So, verbal shout out to Vesper. Go check out his channel. He's does a lot of great retro gaming. So, all right, back to it. The brief statement needed no elaboration, for the tale of the mortal king who journeyed up to the highest heavens was well known throughout the ancient Near East and was a subject of numerous seal depictions. Etana, we are told, was designated by the gods to bring mankind the security and prosperity that kingship and organized civilization was indeed to provide. But Etana, it seems, could not father a son who would continue the dynasty. The only known remedy was a certain plant of birth that Etana could obtain only by fetching it down from the heavens. You've been almost an hour. I'm sorry. I've been so focused on the book that I wasn't paying attention to chat at all. um, Like Gilgamesh at a later time, Etana turned to Shamash for permission and assistance. As the epic unfolds, it becomes clear that Etana was asking Shamash for a Shem. Quote, O Lord, may it issue from thy mouth. Grant thou me the plant of birth. Show me the plant of birth. Remove my handicap. Produce for me a Shem. End quote. Flattered by prayer and fattened by sacrificial sheep, Shamash agreed to grant Etana's request to provide him with a Shem. But instead of speaking of a Shem, Shamash told Etana that an eagle would take him to the desired heavenly place. Directing Etana to the pit where the eagle had been placed, Shamash also informed the eagle ahead of time of the intended mission. Exchanging cryptic messages with Shamash, his lord, the eagle was told, quote, A man I will send to thee, he will take thy hand, lead him hither, do whatever he says, do as I say, end quote. Arriving at the mountain indicated to him by Shamash, quote, Etana saw the pit, and inside it there the eagle was. At the command of the valiant Shamash, the eagle entered into communication with Etana. End quote. Once more, Etana explained his purpose and destination, whereupon the eagle began to instruct Etana on the procedure for raising the eagle from its pit. The first two attempts failed, but on the third one the eagle was properly raised. At daybreak the eagle announced to Etana, quote, My friend, up to the heaven of Anu I will bear thee. End quote. Instructing him how to hold on, the eagle took off, and they were aloft, rising fast. As though reported by a modern astronaut watching Earth recede on his rocket ship as his rocket ship rises, the ancient storyteller describes how Earth appeared smaller and smaller to Etana. Quote, When he had borne him aloft one Beru, the eagle says to him, to Etana, See, my friend, how the land appears. Peer at the sea at the sides of the mountain house. The land has indeed become a mere hill. The wide sea is just like a tub. Higher and higher the eagle rose. Smaller and smaller earth appeared. When he had borne him aloft a second barrow, the eagle said, "My friend, cast a glance at how the land appears. The land has turned into a furrow. The wide sea is just like a bread basket." When he had borne him aloft a third barrow, the eagle says to him, to Etana, "See, my friend, how the land appears. The land has turned into a gardener's ditch." And then, as they continued to ascend, earth was suddenly out of sight. As I glanced around, the land had disappeared, and upon the wide sea mine eyes could not feast. According to one version of this tale, the eagle and Etana did reach the heaven of Anu. But another version states that Etana got cold feet when he could no longer see earth and ordered the eagle to reverse course and plunge down to earth. Once again, we find a biblical parallel to such an unusual report of seeing earth from a great distance above it. Exalting the Lord Yahweh, the prophet Isaiah said to him, quote, "It is he who sitteth upon the circle of the earth, and the inhabitants thereof are as insects." End quote. The tale of Etana informs us that seeking a Shem, Etana had to communicate with an eagle inside a pit. A seal depiction shows a winged tall structure, a launch tower, above which an eagle flies off. Okay. What or who was the eagle who took Etana to the distant heavens? And I'll go ahead and show you the picture. So this is the cylinder seal. I'm assuming this is the tower and the eagle, right? Of course, the tower has wings too, if you look at it. I don't know. All right. We cannot help associating the ancient text with the message beamed to Earth in July 1969 by Neil Armstrong, commander of the Apollo 11 spacecraft. Quote, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." End quote. He was reporting the first landing by man on the moon. Or was he? Anyway, Tranquility Base was the site of the landing. Eagle was the name of the lunar module that had separated from the spacecraft and took the two astronauts inside it to the moon and then back to their mother craft. When the lunar module first separated to start its own flight in moon orbit, the astronauts told Mission Control in Houston, quote, "The Eagle has wings," end quote. But Eagle could also denote the astronauts who manned the spacecraft. On the Apollo 11 mission, Eagle was also the symbol of the astronauts themselves, worn as an emblem on their suits. Just as in the Etana tale, they too were eagles who could fly, speak, and communicate. And we have a picture of that patch, or that emblem, and I'll show you that in just a second. How would an ancient artist have depicted the pilots of the sky ships of the gods? Would he have depicted them by some chance as eagles? That is exactly what we have found. An Assyrian seal engraving from circa 1500 BC shows two eagle men saluting a Shem. Numerous depictions of such eagles, the scholars call them birdmen, have been found. Most depictions show them flanking the tree of life, as if to stress that they, in their Shems, provided the link with the heavenly abode where the bread of life and the water of life were to be found. Okay, let me show you those two pictures. So, the Apollo 11 emblem with the eagle and the moon and Earth up here, and our two eagle men saluting a Shem. All right. Looks like about 8 pages to go. Indeed, the unusual depiction of the eagles showed them holding in one hand the fruit of life and in the other the water of life, in full conformity with the tales of Adapa, Etana, and Gilgamesh. And there's a picture showing that, and we'll get to that in a minute because there's a second picture. The many depictions of the eagles clearly show that they were not monstrous birdmen, but anthropomorphic beings wearing costumes or uniforms that gave them the appearance of eagles. The Hittite tale concerning the god Telepinu, who had vanished, reported that, quote, the great gods and the lesser gods began to search for Telepinu, and Shamash sent out a swift eagle to find him, end quote. In the book of Exodus, God is reported to have reminded the children of Israel, quote, I have carried you upon the wings of eagles, and have brought you unto me, end quote, confirming, it seems, that the way to reach the divine abode was upon the wings of eagles, just as the tale of Etana relates. Numerous biblical verses, as a matter of fact, describe the deity as a winged being. Boaz welcomed Ruth into the Judean community as, quote, coming under the wings, end quote, of the God Yahweh. The psalmist sought security, quote, under the shadow of thy wings, end quote, and described the descent of the Lord from the heavens. Quote, he mounted a cherub and went flying. He soared upon windy wings, end quote. Analyzing similarities between the biblical El, employed as a title or generic term for the deity, and the Canaanite El, S. Langdon's Semitic mythology, showed that both were depicted in text and on coins as winged gods. The Mesopotamian text invariably presents Utu Shamash as the god in charge of the landing place of the Shems and of the eagles. And like his subordinates, he was sometimes shown wearing the full regalia of an eagle's costume. And I'll go ahead and show you those two pictures. So here we have the two men in costume or bird men, whichever it is, with the fruit and water of life around the tree of life. And then, of course, this is Utu Shamash in his regalia. In such a capacity, he could grant to kings the privilege of, quote, flying on the wings of birds and of rising from the lower heavens to the lofty ones, end quote. And when he was launched aloft in a fiery rocket, it was he, quote, who stretched over unknown distances for countless hours, end quote. Appropriately, quote, his net was the earth, his trap the distant skies, end quote. The Sumerian terminology for objects connected with celestial travel was not limited to the mes, or the mes, whatever, that the gods put on, or the mus that were their cone-shaped chariots. Sumerian texts describing Sipar, relate that it had a central part hidden and protected by mighty walls. Within those walls stood the temple of Utu, quote, a house which is like a house of the heavens, end quote. In an inner courtyard of the temple, also protected by high walls, stood, quote, erected upwards the mighty Apin, an object that plows through, end quote, according to the translators. A drawing found at the temple mound of Anu at Uruk depicts such an object. We would have been hard put a few decades ago to guess what this object was, but it is a multi-stage space rocket at the top of which rests the conical, not canonical, the conical mu or command cabin. The evidence that the gods of Sumer possessed not just flying chambers for roaming Earth's skies, but space-going, multi-stage rocket ships also emerges from the examination of texts describing the sacred objects at Utu's temple at Sipar. And we've got 4 pictures here. I'll just wait till I'm done here. We are told that witnesses at Berner's Supreme Court were required to take the oath in an inner courtyard, standing by a gateway through which they could see the face 3 divine objects. These were named the Golden Sphere, the Gir, G-I-R, and the Alikmarati, a term that literally meant advancer that makes vessel go, or what we would call a motor or engine. What emerges here is a reference to a three-part rocket ship with the cabin or command module at the top end, the engines at the bottom end, and the gear, GIR, in the center. The latter is a term that has been used extensively in connection with spaceflight. The guards Gilgamesh encountered at the entrance to the landing place of Shamash were called gearmen. In the Temple of Ninurta, the sacred or most guarded inner area was called the Girsu, where the gear is sprung up. Gear is generally acknowledged as a term used to describe a sharp-edged object. Wow. Okay. A place. I must be getting tired here. A close look at the pictorial sign for gear provides a better understanding of the term's divine nature. For what we see is a long arrow-shaped object divided into several parts or compartments. That's our second picture. That the Mu could hover in Earth's skies on its own or fly over Earth's lands when attached to a gear or become the command module atop a multi-stage Appen is testimony to the engineering ingenuity of the gods of Sumer, the gods of heaven and earth. A review of the Sumerian pictographs and ideograms leaves no doubt that whoever drew those signs was familiar with the shapes and purposes of rockets with tails of billowing fire, missile-like vehicles, and celestial cabins. Okay, I'll go ahead and show you. So here's our multi-stage rocket, supposedly. Here's our arrow-shaped object with the multiple compartments. And here are the pictographs. And this one these have some text here. Kagir, rocket's mouth, showed a fin-equipped gear or rocket inside a shaft-like underground enclosure. And then this one, Esh, divine abode, the chamber or command module of a space vehicle. Okay, almost there. 4 pages to go. And 3 more pictures. So we have another one. It starts immediately, but finally, let us look at the pictograph sign for gods in Sumeria. So let me very quickly, I'll just show you this last one. So this is the last one. Zik, ascend, a command module taking off, question mark. The term, okay, so then the pictograph's sign for gods. The term was a 2-syllable word, Dingir. We have already seen what the symbol for gear was, a 2-staged rocket with fins. Din, the first syllable, means righteous, pure, or bright. Put together, then, Dingir as gods or divine beings conveyed the meaning, quote, the righteous ones of the bright pointed objects, or, more explicitly, the pure ones of the blazing rockets, end quotes. The pictographic sign, which we'll see in a minute, can easily bring to mind a powerful jet engine spewing flames from the end part, and the front part that is puzzlingly open. But the puzzle turns to amazement if we spell Dingir by combining the 2 pictographs. The tail of the fin-like gear fits perfectly into the opening in the front of Din. Okay, we'll get to that also, and then the combination. The astounding result is a picture of a rocket-propelled spaceship with a landing craft docked into it perfectly, just as the lunar module was docked with the Apollo 11 spaceship. It is indeed a 3-stage vehicle, with each part fitting neatly into the other. The thrust portion containing the engines, the midsection containing supplies and equipment, and the cylindrical sky chamber housing the people named Dingir, the gods of antiquity, the astronauts of millennia ago. Can there be any doubt that the ancient peoples, in calling their deities gods of heaven and earth, meant literally that they were people from elsewhere who had come to earth from the heavens? The evidence thus far submitted regarding the ancient gods and their vehicles should leave no further doubt that they were once indeed living beings of flesh and blood, people who literally came down to earth from the heavens. Even the ancient compilers of the Old Testament, who dedicated the Bible to a single God, found it necessary to acknowledge the presence upon earth in early times of such divine beings. The enigmatic section, a horror of translators and theologians alike, forms the beginning of chapter 6 of Genesis. It is interposed between the review of the spread of mankind through the generations following Adam and the story of the divine disenchantment with mankind that preceded the deluge. Okay, so let me get to those pictures real quick. So here we have the din and the gear. He also shows din here with this, and it has this opening, and then the combination where supposedly this command module docks with the din. Take all of this with as much of a grain of salt as you need to. Hello! Is that Salty? Nice to see you. Glad to have you here. We're just about done with the chapter, but thank you for coming in. Always glad to see anybody come in. But yeah, well, this is an enjoyable book, whether it's all complete baloney or not. It's still enjoyable. So let's continue. We've got 2 pages left, I think. It states unequivocally that at that time, quote, the sons of the gods saw the daughters of man that they were good, and they took them for wives of all which they chose, end quote. The implications of these verses, Vesper, I know some people who are into this stuff and they interpret it literally, and that's totally cool. I am reserving judgment. All I'm doing is reading books, and I'm keeping my own personal feelings kind of for the most part out of it. I think it's pretty interesting, and I do have my own views on it, but I'm just going to read the books. Let's see. The implications of these verses and the parallels to the Sumerian tales of gods and their sons and grandsons, and of semi-divine offspring resulting from cohabitation between gods and mortals, mount further as we continue to read the biblical verses. Quote, the Nephilim were upon the earth in those days and thereafter too, when the sons of the gods cohabited with the daughters of the Adam, and they bore children unto them. They were the mighty ones of eternity, the people of the Shem. End quote. The above is not a traditional translation. For a long time, the expression, the Nephilim were upon the earth, has been translated as, there were giants upon the earth. But recent translators, recognizing the error, have simply resorted to leaving the Hebrew term Nephilim intact in the translation. What did you say? You have way more sense than they do, plus they warp their minds with drugs. Yeah, a whole lot of people are really, especially recent years, have gotten into where they want to expand their mind. Like they want to go down to South America and take ayahuasca, and they think that is just this mind expanding thing and you'll never be the same. Yeah, I don't believe I believe you can expand your mind, but doing it artificially is probably the wrong track. I'll just put it that way. They would be drinking Kool-Aid with Jim Jones. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, Um, let's see. The verse, the people of the Shem, as one could expect, has been taken to mean the people who have a name, and thus the people of renown. But as we have already established, the term Shem must be taken in its original meaning, a rocket ship. What then does the term Nephilim mean? Stemming from the Semitic root Nephil, NFL, to be cast down. It means exactly what it says. It means those who were cast down upon earth. Contemporary theologians and biblical scholars have tended to avoid the troublesome verses, either by explaining them away allegorically or simply by ignoring them altogether. But Jewish writings of the time of the Second Temple did recognize in these verses the echoes of ancient tradition of fallen angels. Some of the early scholarly works even mention the names of these divine beings, quote, who fell from heaven and were on earth in those days, end quote. Shamhazai, Shem's lookout, Uzzah, mighty, and Uzziel, God's might. Malbim, a noted Jewish biblical commentator of the 19th century, recognized these ancient roots and explained that, quote, in ancient times the rulers of countries were the sons of the deities who arrived upon the earth from the heavens and ruled the earth, and married wives from among the daughters of man, and their offspring included heroes and mighty ones, princes and sovereigns, end quote. These stories, Malbim said, were of the pagan gods, quote, sons of the deities who in earliest times fell down from heavens upon the earth. That is why they called themselves Nephilim, i.e., those who fell down, end quote. Irrespective of the theological implications, the literal and original meaning of the verses cannot be escaped. The sons of the gods who came to earth from the heavens were the Nephilim, and the Nephilim were the people of the Shem, the people of the rocket ships. Henceforth we shall call them by their biblical name. And that is the end of that chapter. And the next one, it's actually titled the 12th planet. So we finally get to what the book is supposed to be about, the 12th planet. Of course, I mean, all of this stuff about the gods and the Nephilim and all that, of course, is what the book is about. But I mean, it's titled the 12th planet for a reason. Anyway, I love reading this kind of stuff, just like I love reading Eric von Daniken books. It doesn't mean I believe it. I just enjoy it a lot. And that's why I read them on this stream. So I hope everybody enjoyed this chapter. If you came in late and you don't want to replay the video here, all of the chapters are on my YouTube channel, so you can always go there and stream them, however you like to. It is like partaking in mythology, learning about other cultures and beliefs. Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but getting a non-mainstream interpretation of the mythology and the cultures and beliefs. So I would love to read some other book that details the mythology of like Sumeria, but purely from a mainstream scholarly perspective, just to kind of see how they're presenting the same stuff. That would be, to me, pretty interesting. And maybe I'll do that eventually. Right now, I'm not sure what I'm going to read next. We're only about 40% through this book, so it's going to be a while. And I know I've got stuff like that, so I will look through that. Maybe we'll go into that next, because it'll be a good follow-on to this. I was actually kind of thinking of jumping back into one of these books by David Bryan Davis. actually the one before this I don't have in hard copy. It's the age of, or the problem of slavery in the age of revolution. So it's about the Revolutionary War era and slavery. Kind of thinking of doing that next, but maybe I'll push it back and do some mythology, Sumerian mythology. You prefer nonfiction? This is supposed to be nonfiction. It's just, Um, but yeah, maybe I'll do some mythology. But I don't know. We'll think about it. We've got 60% of the book left to go. Mythology is nonfiction, yes, and so is this. This is good stuff too. The first book of his I read was fantastic. Um, Also on my YouTube channel if you missed it. Uh, so I don't remember which playlist it's on though. I have a 2023 playlist and a 2024 playlist. It could be on the 23. So if you're interested, it's there. So, all right. Um, let's close that down and see who's around. I have gone to Mr. Blitzer quite a bit lately. Hot Dog Raw Dog is on right now. I don't really care about Kingdom Hearts at all, but he's supported me a fair bit. So you're enjoying this book. I am too. It's and I've got many more of Zecharia Sitchin's books. So I pretty much will just chat with Hot Dog for a minute and then just mute the tab and go off and do my own thing. Um, it's just not my kind of game. I don't care about it. But he supports me, so I want to give him some support in return. So if you'll bear with me and give him a couple minutes and say hi and then, lurk or whatever, tab it, we can head on over there and I will see you there. Yep, leave it on minimum volume. Right, right. Okay, here we go. We will head on over there.